Have you ever wondered how a nurse, someone sworn to protect and heal, could become one of America's most prolific child killers? In Texas during the 1970s, one woman would shatter our trust in the medical system, leaving a trail of tiny victims that haunts families to this day. But before we reveal the full horror of her crimes, let me show you how this ordinary nurse managed to hide in plain sight for years. Born July 13, 1950 in Texas, Genene Jones's story begins like many others, with pain. Growing up in a broken home, young Genene showed early warning signs that something wasn't quite right. But unlike most troubled children who eventually find their way, Jones would channel her darkness into something far more sinister. What makes this story particularly chilling isn't just what she became, but how she got there. Despite her difficult childhood, Jones managed to achieve something remarkable. She became a licensed vocational nurse in the 1970s. To the outside world, she appeared to be overcoming her past, dedicating herself to saving lives. But appearances can be deceiving, and what happened next would shock the medical community to its core. Working in San Antonio's pediatric intensive care unit, Jones found herself in the perfect position to carry out her devastating plans. But here's what makes this story truly terrifying. She didn't just kill randomly. Instead, she developed a calculated method that would allow her to murder while maintaining her image as a dedicated healthcare worker. Using her medical knowledge, Jones would inject children with lethal doses of medications like digoxin, a heart medication, and heparin, a blood thinner. But here's the twisted part. She wouldn't just kill them outright. Instead, she created medical emergencies that allowed her to play the hero, attempting to save the very children she had harmed. This pattern would continue for years, with an estimated 60 infants and children falling victim to her schemes. In 1982, a little girl named Chelsea McClellan came under Jones's care. What happened to Chelsea would finally expose the monster hiding behind the nurse's uniform. After Chelsea's suspicious death, investigators discovered digoxin in her system, leading to a full investigation that would uncover the horrifying truth about Genene Jones. And this leads us to wonder, what drives a person to harm the most innocent among us? In Jones's case, experts point to a complex web of psychological issues. The first, Jones showed signs of personality disorders, and some experts believe she had a deep need for attention and recognition. She may have been drawn to the power and control that came with causing life-threatening situations. The second was a desire for attention. Some speculate that Jones had a deep-seated desire for validation and attention, which she did not receive in other aspects of her life. By causing medical crises, she could gain the spotlight, as her actions were often noticed by colleagues and medical staff. And the third was possible mental illness. Jones may have suffered from an untreated mental illness, such as Munchausen syndrome by proxy, where a caregiver causes harm to a person in their care in order to gain attention or sympathy. Her actions seem driven by a compulsion rather than personal gain, which might suggest psychological issues that went unaddressed during her career. But perhaps most disturbing was how these psychological issues manifested, through a perverse desire to create crisis situations where she could play the hero. While Jones was eventually sentenced to 99 years in prison for Chelsea McClellan's murder, her story doesn't end there. In 2020, justice caught up with her again when she was convicted of murdering another child, Ricky McClelland. But the true impact of her crimes extends far beyond the courtroom. Jones's reign of terror fundamentally changed how we approach healthcare security. First off, it led to hospital oversight. Jones's case highlighted the need for better oversight and accountability in healthcare institutions. Jones's ability to evade detection for so long shows gaps in hospital protocols and the failure of medical staff to report suspicious behavior. It also created skepticism about medical professionals. Her case also sparked a wider conversation about the potential for abuse of power within the healthcare profession. It led to the increased scrutiny of medical professionals and a reevaluation of how medical institutions protect their patients. Lastly, changes in medical investigations were made. The investigation into Jones's actions marked a significant moment in how hospitals investigate unexplained deaths. The case set a precedent for how medical professionals are evaluated and the importance of following up on anomalies in patient outcomes, especially in pediatric care. But perhaps the most important change was invisible, a shift in how we think about trust in medical professionals. Today, Genene Jones remains behind bars, but her story serves as a crucial reminder of how systems can fail to protect the most vulnerable. While medical institutions have evolved since her crimes, one question remains. Could it happen again? The answer lies in remaining vigilant and understanding that sometimes the most dangerous predators wear the masks of those we trust most. Jones's legacy isn't just one of tragedy. It's a wake-up call that continues to influence healthcare security today. This story reminds us that evil can hide in the most unexpected places, and that protecting the vulnerable requires constant vigilance. If you think targeting children was the ultimate betrayal of medical trust, wait until you hear how Kristen Gilbert repaid the veterans who served our country. Have you ever wondered what drives someone sworn to save lives to become a calculated killer? In the halls of a Veterans Affairs medical center, one nurse's dark obsession with playing God would shake the medical community to its core. But before I reveal how she orchestrated these deaths, let me show you why this case changed hospital security forever. Picture this: Fall River, Massachusetts, 1967. A baby girl is born who would grow up to become one of healthcare's most terrifying predators. But Kristen Gilbert wasn't your typical troubled child. She was brilliant, ambitious, and determined to prove herself in the medical field. By 1989, she had achieved her dream, becoming a nurse at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center. But here's what makes this story truly chilling. While her colleagues saw a dedicated professional, Gilbert was harboring a deadly secret that would turn a place of healing into a hunting ground. Now, you might be thinking, how could someone get away with murder in one of the most monitored environments in healthcare? The answer will shock you. Gilbert discovered something that would make her nearly untraceable: epinephrine. This is where things get disturbing. Epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, was the perfect weapon. When injected improperly, it causes cardiac arrest. But here's the twisted part. Gilbert wouldn't just kill her patients. She would create emergencies just like Genene Jones that allowed her to play the hero, rushing in to save the very lives she had put in danger. Let me paint you a picture of how she operated. Imagine being a patient in Gilbert's ward. Everything seems normal until suddenly your heart starts racing uncontrollably. As you struggle to breathe, a nurse rushes in to help. The same nurse who secretly caused your crisis moments before. But Gilbert's reign of terror wouldn't last forever. What happened next would expose a pattern so disturbing that it would change hospital security protocols forever. In 1996, something happened that would finally break this deadly cycle. A 79-year-old veteran named William S. became Gilbert's last victim. But this time, her colleagues had started noticing a pattern that would blow the case wide open. Want to know what finally gave her away? It wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm of suspicious timing, unexplained deaths, and one crucial mistake that would lead to her downfall. Now you might be wondering, what drives someone to commit such horrific acts? The answer is more complex than you might think. Gilbert's motivations weren't about money or revenge. Instead, they revealed something far more disturbing: her desire for attention and praise. Gilbert seemed to derive a sense of power and validation from the crises she caused. She would intentionally harm her patients to create a situation in which she could save them, positioning herself as a hero. Her desire for attention and recognition likely drove her to repeatedly engage in dangerous behavior. She had psychological issues. Gilbert exhibited traits consistent with certain personality disorders, including narcissistic and antisocial traits. She appeared to lack empathy for her patients and was willing to manipulate her role as a nurse for personal gain. Some experts have suggested that she may have suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disorder where a caregiver harms others in their care to gain attention or sympathy, and is a condition that was speculated that Genene Jones had. Her need for control and power. Gilbert's actions may have been driven by a need for control over her environment. By inducing medical emergencies and then rescuing her patients, she established a sense of dominance and control over life and death in her workplace. This desire for control could have been a significant motivating factor. In 2001, Gilbert's game finally ended. The evidence against her was overwhelming, leading to a life sentence without parole. But here's what's truly shocking. Even after being caught, she showed no remorse for her actions. Gilbert's crimes didn't just end with her imprisonment. They fundamentally changed how we think about hospital security. Gilbert's actions prompted hospitals and healthcare institutions to reevaluate their patient safety protocols, particularly concerning medication administration. Her ability to manipulate medical emergencies highlighted weaknesses in how healthcare professionals monitored the administration of drugs and the protocols in place for handling sudden cardiac events. Gilbert's case underscored the potential dangers of nurses and other healthcare professionals who misuse their power. The case raised awareness about the need for careful monitoring of medical professionals who show signs of inappropriate behavior or emotional instability. Gilbert became one of the first well-known cases of a nurse serial killer who was motivated not by financial gain or personal vendettas, but by a need for attention and recognition. Her case contributed to research into the psychological profiles of healthcare professionals who commit such crimes. Her crimes shocked the public and raised questions about how hospitals track patient outcomes and medical staff behavior. It became clear that hospitals need more stringent internal controls, especially when it comes to high-risk areas like intensive care units. Today, Kristen Gilbert sits behind bars, but her story serves as a crucial warning about the vulnerabilities in our healthcare system. While hospitals have improved their security since her crimes, one question remains. Could another Kristen Gilbert be out there right now? But decades before Jones and Gilbert ever put on their nursing uniforms, another woman had already written the playbook for medical murder. Let me take you back to early 20th century Connecticut, where Amy Archer-Gilligan was about to turn elderly care into a deadly business. Have you ever wondered what evil could lurk behind the caring smile of someone trusted to look after our most vulnerable? In 1916, a shocking discovery would reveal how one woman turned a peaceful retirement home into a house of horrors. But before I tell you how many victims fell prey to her deadly scheme, let me show you why this case changed elderly care in America forever. Picture this: Windsor, Connecticut, 1868. A baby girl is born on Halloween, a date that would prove eerily prophetic. Amy Archer-Gilligan seemed ordinary enough, marrying James Archer in 1894. But what happened after her husband's death in 1907 would expose a sinister plot that nobody saw coming. Here's where things get interesting. Instead of seeking typical employment, Amy made a decision that would give her access to countless vulnerable victims. She opened the Archer Home for the Aged. Now you might be thinking, running a retirement home seems like an honest way to make a living. But Amy had discovered something far more profitable than monthly care fees. She found a way to turn death into dollars, and her method was frighteningly simple. Using easily obtained poisons, strychnine and arsenic, Amy began systematically killing her residents. But here's the truly chilling part. She made each death appear natural, collecting life insurance policies and inheritances while maintaining her image as a caring nurse. The body count was staggering. While the exact number remains unknown, investigators believe up to 60 elderly residents met their fate at Amy's hands. Let me put that in perspective. That's more victims than many of history's most notorious serial killers combined. But how did she get away with it for so long? The answer reveals a disturbing truth about elderly care in early 20th century America. Amy's reign of terror might have continued indefinitely, if not for one crucial error. In 1916, she poisoned a resident named John D. McFadden. But unlike her other victims, McFadden's family noticed something suspicious: a life insurance policy cashed by Amy just before his death. What happened next would unravel one of the most disturbing cases in American criminal history. You might be wondering, what drives someone to murder the very people they're supposed to protect? The answer is more complex than you might think. Archer-Gilligan seemed to be motivated by greed and the desire for financial security. She saw the elderly residents of her home as a source of income, not only through their payments to stay at the home, but also through the life insurance policies and inheritances she stood to collect when they died. Like many other serial killers, Archer-Gilligan seemed to have a complete lack of empathy for her victims. Her actions were cold and calculated, with no regard for the suffering she caused. She did not hesitate to kill the elderly, most of whom were vulnerable and dependent on her care. Some psychologists suggest that Archer-Gilligan may have had a psychopathic personality, characterized by manipulativeness, lack of empathy, and a capacity for extreme cruelty. It is also possible that she suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which, as you know, is a disorder where a caregiver harms those in their care to gain attention or financial benefit. Archer-Gilligan may have felt a sense of power and control over life and death. As the person in charge of the home, she had access to the vulnerable elderly residents, and she likely enjoyed the ability to decide who would live and who would die. After her arrest in 1916, Amy Archer-Gilligan's trial became a highly publicized affair. Public opinion at the time was shocked by the gruesome nature of her crimes, and many were horrified to learn that a woman who was entrusted with the care of the elderly could commit such heinous acts. During the trial, Archer-Gilligan's defense team argued that she was mentally unstable and unable to fully comprehend the consequences of her actions. They cited her potential mental illness and emotional instability as factors in her decision-making. However, the prosecution presented compelling evidence that she had intentionally killed her victims for financial gain. Ultimately, she was convicted of the murder of John McFadden. In 1917, Amy was sentenced to life in prison, but here's where the story takes another dark turn. Her conviction was overturned in 1919 due to questions about her mental health. Instead of prison, she spent the rest of her life in a mental institution, dying in 1962 at age 93. Amy's crimes didn't just end with her institutionalization. They fundamentally changed how we protect our elderly. Archer-Gilligan's crimes drew attention to the vulnerability of elderly people in care facilities and the possibility of abuse by those in positions of trust. Her case highlighted the need for better oversight of nursing homes and elderly care institutions, which were often underregulated at the time. The case prompted reforms in the way elderly care homes were monitored, especially regarding the safety of residents and the actions of staff members. It led to greater scrutiny of individuals who managed such facilities and stricter regulations regarding the treatment of elderly people. Archer-Gilligan's trial helped to shape early studies in criminal psychology, particularly concerning motivations for murder and the psychological profiles of those who commit crimes for financial gain. Her case has been used in discussions about psychopathy, personality disorders, and Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Amy Archer-Gilligan's case was one of the early examples of a female serial killer. While female serial killers are often perceived as being less common than male ones, her case showed that women could also commit murder, often for reasons that were different from those of male killers. This has influenced how society and criminologists think about the motivations of female killers. Today, while Amy Archer-Gilligan's name might not be as well known as other serial killers, her case serves as a crucial warning about who we trust with our most vulnerable loved ones. But here's the scary part. Could something like this happen again? Let me bring these three chilling stories together because what makes them truly terrifying isn't just the individual crimes, it's the pattern they reveal. Genene Jones, Kristen Gilbert, and Amy Archer-Gilligan, three women separated by decades but united by a disturbing truth, they all exploited our trust in caregivers to commit their crimes. Think about it. Jones targeted innocent children, Gilbert preyed on vulnerable veterans, and Archer-Gilligan murdered elderly residents, spanning every generation of victims. But here's what makes their cases even more frightening. Each woman found different ways to hide in plain sight. Jones created medical emergencies to play the hero. Gilbert used adrenaline to mimic natural deaths, and Archer-Gilligan poisoned residents while collecting insurance money. But there's something even more disturbing that connects these cases. Each time, the healthcare system evolved to prevent these exact crimes from happening again. Yet somehow, similar crimes continued to occur. It's almost as if each killer learned from the mistakes of those who came before them. So here's what keeps investigators up at night. Are there more predators like these women operating in our healthcare system right now? The uncomfortable truth is that we may never know until it's too late. Here's where you come in. Knowledge is power, and by understanding these cases, you become part of the solution. These stories aren't just about murder, they're about recognizing the warning signs before tragedy strikes. These stories reveal something profound about women's roles in history. Not all chapters are about breaking glass ceilings. Sometimes they're about exposing dangerous cracks in our most trusted institutions. Genene Jones, Kristen Gilbert, and Amy Archer-Gilligan represent a darker side of women's history in healthcare. While countless women were fighting to be recognized as legitimate medical professionals, these three used their hard-won positions of trust to commit unthinkable acts. Think about the historical context. Archer-Gilligan operated in an era when women were just beginning to gain independence in business, while Jones worked during a time when female nurses were finally being respected as medical professionals. And Gilbert served in a male-dominated VA system where women had fought hard to be accepted. Each woman took the opportunities that generations of female healthcare pioneers had fought for and twisted them for their own dark purposes. Their actions not only devastated families, but threatened to undermine the credibility of women in medicine who had worked so hard to earn their place. But there's another side to these stories. While these women committed horrible crimes, their cases actually led to positive changes, such as enhanced respect for female whistleblowers in healthcare, better protections for vulnerable patients, improved oversight systems created by female healthcare administrators, and new opportunities for women in hospital security and investigation. As we explore women's history, both the triumphs and the tragedies, these stories remind us that progress isn't just about celebrating achievements. It's also about acknowledging the complex and sometimes dark roles women have played in shaping our world. If you're fascinated by the complex roles women have played throughout history, from groundbreaking heroes to notorious villains, you're in the right place. This channel is dedicated to telling the complete story of women in history, the good, the bad, and yes, sometimes the truly ugly. Hit subscribe to join our community of history enthusiasts exploring the full spectrum of women's impact on our world. And if you found this deep dive into the darker side of medical history enlightening, give this video a like to help others discover these important historical lessons. Remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell to never miss another chapter in women's history. Whether they're stories of triumph or cautionary tales, every woman's story deserves to be told. Together, let's explore the full, unvarnished truth about women who shaped our world, for better or worse.